G'day, it's your old mate Matthew here from the Yarnsman. Today we have Dan Oatridge on the podcast. We get into a few things there around identity, medication, and mental health first aid. If you find this triggering, because we do touch on suicide and depression and medication and things, please feel free to step out or check our website for support resources. I found this episode interesting because Dan is a passionate mental health advocate. We discuss his journey with identity from rugby and the impact on his mental health, the process of taking medication and kind of how that works, and how mental health first aid has helped him along the way and how he's using that to help other people. I hope you enjoy this yarn as much as I did. Hello and welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. This afternoon we have Dan Oatridge. Dan, how are you, mate?
I'm very good, Matthew. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Always a good part of the day when I get to have a good yarn over the podcast.
Yeah, nice way to finish what are we, a Tuesday, I think, today?
Yeah, whatever day of the week it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dan, you're a son, brother, husband, and you're a mental health first aider, which we'll get into later. It's a nice wee intro. What have you struggled with in the last week?
So I've been coming back from I had a couple of kidney stones, one particularly bad one, about 3 weeks ago, and that I had to go in to get operated on and removed, and then there was about a week's worth of recovery on the backside of that. And anyone who's ever had a kidney stone will know the pain, but blokes who have also had a stent left inside that they've had to remove will also understand where I'm coming from. So I'm sort of coming back from that, and basically the last sort of couple of weeks, a week especially, I've been getting back into the gym and getting back into some exercise. And while it may not be the kind of it's definitely been a type of struggle. It's been a good one. But with that has come the sort of the mental side of things of having to kind of get up and do it. And that can be a bit of a struggle sometimes. Not everyone likes going and spending time in the gym and that kind of stuff. But I found through a lot of trial and error that it's something that's very important for me to do for my mental health. So it's kind of a necessary evil, unfortunately. But it's one that, at the time might not be particularly fun. But certainly on the backside of that, I notice a lot. So, yeah. But, there's been a bit like I've got that. We've got some, we've just moved into an apartment that's a bit leaky, a bathroom leak. So managing all this stuff along with, coming back has been, it's a struggle. It's not the worst struggle in the world to have, obviously, but it's still something that I'm not really particularly familiar with. So it's all a learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah, I had gallbladder issues for 5 years before I had it removed earlier in the year. So I understand that pain, and that brings that kind of mental struggle around all of that and the recovery. So not getting too far ahead of yourself is the key, right?
Yeah. When the doctor explained to me what I was going to have to do to remove the stent, when it came time to do that, I certainly had to mentally go to a different place to figure that one out, to make it through there. So, the flip side is I now have to stay well hydrated. So, that's a small price to pay, I think, for some health moving forward.
Yeah, well, looking ahead to the next week, what's something you want to work on?
I want to continue my fitness and my exercise. I need to. I'm recently having some. There's been some changes for the company that I contract to, and I've taken on a bit more responsibility with them and a little bit more control over the workshops and that kind of stuff that I didn't have before. So that's certainly work in progress, and once again there's a lot of learning and a lot of getting my head around a few things that I haven't really had to worry about before. Normally, I'm just kind of turning up and delivering a workshop, and the focus is, more localized to there, I guess. But now I'm have a bit more to do with how we fill the workshops and getting out there to get some people into these things, and the sort of marketing side of things as well. So that's a lot of stuff that I'm not particularly familiar with, but definitely learning a lot of that as we go. So yeah, that's I mean, for the next week, next few weeks as well. So
Well, it's a good bit of growth opportunity there, right?
yeah, it is growth, and it's change as well. And what I've sort of found out is that it can often feel pretty uncomfortable. But that just means it's learning something new and doing something new, and that can be uncomfortable, but it's all part of it, and it basically will enable me to do more of what I love. So can't be all bad. It's
Ideal.
yeah.
What are you proud of?
Oh gosh. I'm proud of a lot. I guess without sort of going back way too far. So I mean, moving house, you kind of uncover a lot of things and find a lot of things, and oh wow, I didn't remember. That's where that is, or oh, I didn't know I did that. So bringing back, sort of going sort of further back, finding some old photos of like my old first 15 at high school. We won our competition. That's something that I'm still super proud of 20 odd years later. Like my team was the last team to win a championship for my high school, so that's how long it's been, and so that's something I'm pretty proud of. But I found the gold medal we got, and so I was like, wow, that's where that went. But this is sort of bring back those nostalgic memories. More sort of recently, I'm really proud of how I got through the kidney stone stuff. I'm really proud of how my wife and I have worked really, really hard to get into this apartment that we've just moved into. There was a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of I had a mental breakdown sort of halfway through saving for this place. So,
Mhm.
there's been a lot of water that's gone under the bridge there, and a lot of things have happened in the last few years that make, when you reflect back, you go, wow, that's actually we actually did work really, really hard for that, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that the work that I'm doing with mental health first aid, and how we can reach people, and how we're teaching, or trying to teach people skills that they will absolutely use at some point in their life, whether they sort of are aware of it or not. And I know that sounds like an absolutely will sounds like a big call, but we'll talk a bit more about later about how it's a fairly accurate assumption to make. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that I'm proud of recently than perhaps some of the mistakes I made in the past. But it's I'm proud of the way we're dealing with the structural leak issues that we're having at the moment, because I could deal with it a completely different way, but we've kind of chosen to remain calm and collected with it, and that's it's as challenging as it's been very hard to kind of like not get a bit sort of angry
Mm.
about things. But we've kind of discussed it, my wife and I, and there's no point sort of getting angry at people. It doesn't really solve anything, so we've chosen to sort of go this way, and at the moment it seems to be it seems to be working. We'll see. Maybe we have to pull out the sort of the more anger later on if things don't get fixed. But it's I digress.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed that all goes smoothly, mate. What gives you hope?
um, so podcasts like this give me hope. seeing people who are doing a lot of work in the mental health space gives me a lot of hope with mental health and the things that mental health challenges that people face. I know in this day and age, it can be quite hard to look at things with a hopeful kind of outlook. The words crisis and emergency and all this kind of stuff are thrown around fairly commonly and fairly regularly. So it can be tough, especially depending on how old you are, I suppose, to look into at the future with a lot of hope. But I like to when I see small things happen, that's when I'm like, oh, okay, that gives me some hope. The person being nice to someone in line, or the person helping someone out with something small, that sort of gives you that hope that some of the human decency is still around. But yeah, I mean, I like to look at things around me and sort of, I don't know, surround myself with people that I feel like have, you know what I mean, that kind of they look forward to the same things, and there's I mean, hope's an interesting word to start with, but yeah, I mean more locally and sort of in context with the podcast, I suppose. Mental health first aid gives me hope. Mental health first aid has given me a lot of hope. Like there's a lot of hope that's come from that thing. That's can get into that deeper, but yeah, it's an interesting question though. It's a nice question.
Yeah, people struggle to answer that one sometimes, but
Mm.
well, let's dive into your journey, because I'm keen to get to the how mental health first aid's given you hope. But perhaps you want to start at the beginning of your journey or your yarn, mate. How would you like to share that?
Yeah, I guess sort of starting and going backwards a little bit. So I found mental health first aid when I was in a fairly bad place, like myself. I was in a work environment that wasn't super healthy, and I didn't really have the skills in order to be able to deal with that. But one thing that was going round was this initiative from the head office, basically, to have this weird thing called a mental health first aider in all of the stores, all the places around Australia and New Zealand. And because I have some family experience with mental health, I have uncle that is fairly unwell, schizophrenia, and it's quite severe. I sort of put my hand up for that, and what I didn't really realize was at the time I actually needed a lot of that myself, a lot of what we spoke about, and so sort of what I came to find was the work environment I was working in wasn't particularly good for me, and I fell into a very dark place that ended or it didn't actually end, it almost ended with a suicide attempt, but it involved a lot of self-medication with prescription medication, as well as recreational medication. I say that sort of facetiously.
Yeah.
And it's that, I mean, I have a kind of maybe a wouldn't say controversial opinion on medication, but what I sort of found was that the medication didn't really work for me at all. It just made things way worse. And yeah, sort of leading down a dark road. What the meds did was take the feelings away, but it didn't get rid of the thoughts. And so that's what I was sort of struggling with, was the dark thoughts, and not knowing how to kind of manage that. So essentially, I left. We ended up parting ways with the place I was working for, and that's when I kind of spiraled pretty far down. You just quit this job that was meant to be like the forever job, or the career, and didn't really know what to do. And so after a few weeks of feeling pretty miserable and pretty sorry for myself, you sort of shake it off eventually. And, like at some point there was a moment of clarity and I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Have to pay rent, all that kind of stuff. But what I found was that I really loved this mental health stuff. And I felt like I had some experience that other people could learn from, perhaps, without seeming too sort of, hopeful about it. Maybe at this stage there wasn't a lot of hope. To be fair, it wasn't. Well, the irony is I got these wristbands for when I was sort of trying to start my own company up, Black Dog Mental Health, and the little slogan I have is "Be the Hope." Because you might have heard that thing like, I needed a superhero, so I became one. So you, like, if there's no hope around you, sometimes you've got to be that thing. But what mental health first aid gave me was the skills, not only to sort of recognize what I was experiencing, but through the people that would come along to these workshops, a lot of different perspective, and a lot of sort of tips and tricks and other ways of looking at these mental health challenges. At the time, I was sort of, there were battles and fights and struggles. So finding that stuff was super useful to me, because years before that, I left high school. Sorry to sort of do a massive time jump. In the movies, it's like the big cut, and we've gone back in time. Left high school, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Randomly started working a few different jobs and saved up, and then went overseas for about 2 years. I spent a couple of years in Canada playing rugby around Vancouver and east and west coast, so Vancouver and Nova Scotia, Halifax and Nova Scotia. What sort of the coming back home from that was, I found really difficult. There was a lot of things going on near the end of that trip that kind of influenced my mental health coming home, or the lack thereof. And so, having been through that previously and knowing like that's what depression is, that's also sort of informed my decision, post working in retail, that mental health first aid and the mental health space is one that I really want to be in, because I think I have something to offer that a lot of people could learn from. Whether it's useful to them or not, I don't know. But so it's kind of been an interesting journey. There's a lot that has sort of gone in between there, but I'll take a break from talking for a second, because
no, it's all interesting stuff, and thank you for sharing. I've got a bunch of questions, and the one I want to start with is your identity at high school and winning this gold medal. And so we know that sort of, that's a real tough time, or risk factor time for people as they transition out of something like, first 15 rugby and winning the gold medal. How much of that kind of transition, and kind of after that, I guess, to playing overseas and then coming back from there, how much do you kind of attribute identity as part of the challenge there?
I know identity and sort of being comfortable in yourself is quite important. I've always felt fairly, I guess, especially with rugby, a lot of the times through high school, footy was like the one thing that I knew that I could do. I was pretty good at it. I knew I don't know, fit in, whatever. And so that was, the dream was to be an All Black, right? That was my dream. That was the thing. I left school in 2003, and I was playing blindside flanker, right? And I was 85 kilos soaking wet. You may have heard of a couple dudes that were also playing blindside flanker and open side at the time. They're fairly handy rugby players as well. And I'm not saying that had I continued, I would have come even close. But like looking back on it now, like it's a dream, right? But it's a dream that sort of a lot of kids have, and
Mm.
not all of them achieve it. But I guess my thing was I hadn't really thought about not achieving that, but there was kind of a huge gap that was like it was just was never going to happen. Like I don't have any problem sort of saying that now. So the identity of like the desire to be an All Black was always there.
Mm.
But the reality of, maybe what was happening, what was to come after that certainly wasn't. And not just, it has been a strange transition, because, I know we all change who we are for the most part when we leave like high school. There's a lot of years between, when we're 18 and whatever. But I'm probably quite different, almost the opposite to where I was. Still love sports, still love footy, but like 18-year-old Dan would sometimes look and hear at the stuff that 39-year-old Dan says and does and goes, "Who are you? I don't recognize you. What the hell happened to you?" There was something I said the other day, and my wife just looked at me and she's just like, and I was just like, "Yep, I heard it too." Like, 18-year-old me would have kicked my backside just then
Yeah.
just to say it. But I mean, it's I was an idiot when I was 18, so what did I know?
Weren't
But
we all?
yeah, I mean, it's all part of learning, isn't it? So I mean, and look, identity is something, through the workshops I've come to understand is really important to a lot of people. And especially when it comes to more marginalized communities and members of those communities, where their identity may be dismissed or, I don't know, overlooked, or I know these sort of variations of the same word, but yeah, it was, I had to find something new. And I've had a few like former rugby players and former sports people on these workshops who, through injury or through whatever reason, have had to also form that new identity after, the playing days are over, because it's, you can't play footy all your life or whatever, and at some point, there's going to be a time where you got to hang things up, and that can be a real struggle for people, like a real struggle. So it's something that I probably wished I'd been more aware of, and it may have curbed some of the dark thoughts. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask, before we kind of get in a bit more on the mental health first aid, is around your experience with medication. Now, your stories, I've heard this a lot, right? And people are, I tried something, it didn't work. Now medication's not for me.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for someone now who may be,
Mm,
first time coming across depression or anxiety or any other mental health form of mental health? Advice would you have for them?
yeah. Um, so I'd have a few pieces of advice. One is you got to give it some time. It's not going to happen overnight. Um, as much as old Rachel Hunter in the Pantene Pro V ads, as she says, it won't happen overnight. Um, and you may feel, uh, you may not like it, essentially. So, bit of context. I was in a really bad place. I was probably not ready to be given medication, in the sense of like, I don't know, my education, my acceptance of what I was going through. I I call them the PAMS range, especially for anxiety. Lorazepam, diazepam, clonazepam, um, citalopram, I think is another one. Well, that's a pram. But and as I said earlier, what they did was they killed all the feelings, but they didn't get rid of any of the thoughts, and that's where the problem was, or that's where the feelings come from, you know. So like, it's just make you feel real numb. But I was abusing this stuff, and I was not using them as prescribed, that's for sure. But I was also experiencing or living with a lot of pain as well. So there was a lot of I had a real bad back. So you've got painkillers for the back, and I had anti-anxiety medications for the anxiety and the depression. And who to think it, they don't really mix very well, and they can really cause a lot of damage. But what I was doing was sort of well, if one pill's going to work, like five will work really well as well, you know, and this is absolutely something I don't recommend, you know, at all, because it's essentially just abusing the medication, and this stuff's powerful stuff. Like, this is powerful stuff. I didn't even realize, how powerful it was until I was coming off the stuff. And that's when I wanted to jump off my 5th floor balcony, because of the noise, and I hadn't slept for like 3 days, and I was once again made a bad decision to come off cold turkey, you know, unsupervised, and just really bad decisions. But my psychiatrist wasn't really helping, just prescribing this stuff. So I ended up having a letter from the Ministry of Health, basically sent to my GP, the pharmacy, and my psychiatrist, going like, why? I didn't even realize, but I'd been prescribed and consumed 12 months worth of whatever medication it was in 6 months. So I was taking double the amount essentially, and they were like, what's going on? Fair comment to ask, because I don't know what was going on, you know. I was just trying to get rid of the thoughts, but these people kept giving me more pills. So with that being said, I know medication help a lot of people, and some people are still around because of the medication they're on. So there's absolutely a place for medication. What I would like to see is the education around that medication increase substantially, because everything that I've sort of discovered and found out with the medication has come off the back of me researching it. The doctor, I can't even remember at the time, was like, oh, you might feel a bit funny for a couple of days. And I think that's about as deep as the side effect kind of conversation went. So without me, like, had I not gone and read the little booklet you get in the box of pills, you know, or like Googled the medication. Had I not done that stuff, I wouldn't have had any real idea about it. And so now I do that for almost everything if I'm ever taking anything. Yeah, so like I felt pretty let down, and like not having those pills for like 3 days, that was like the cold turkey coming off that stuff was horrible. Like it was just the worst. And so that was enough to go, I don't want anything to do with these things. So like my advice would be to ask lots of questions. If you don't like what's happening while you're taking them, go back and talk to the doctor. Don't just come off them, because some people do need them and they're actually going to help. But it's just a matter of like getting a dosage right, or, you know, that kind of thing.
Finding the thing or things that are right for you, and you know, be curious and keep going. I know it's a tough thing to be doing whilst you're in that state of mind, but keep asking those questions and as you say, do your research.
Yeah.
Jumping in to the mental health first aid. So I've been trained in mental health first aid. I've even helped do some training kind of with wellbeing champions. The thing that I'm going to pose to you, because I think it's great, the mental health first aid. However, there's a thing around actually the uptake or the kind of implementation or integration of mental health first aid, and it's sometimes seen as a box ticking exercise. Certainly some of the conversations I've had. What do you say to that?
It's an interesting one. I worked for Lifeline for a couple of years, 2019 to about 2022. Something happened then. I can't remember really what it was, but I we had this conversation many a time, which was actually it crushes me that people would look at this as a box ticking exercise, um, especially knowing the value of the skills that we talk about. Um, it's kind of ironic though, because perhaps even though physical first aid, so I look at physical first aid and mental health first aid as essentially being the same. For me, they both should be compulsory. You should have to have, I don't know, depending on the size of your business, you should, the same as you have an X number of physical first aiders, you have X number of mental health first aiders. And I would venture to bet that the mental health first aiders will use their skills a whole lot more than the physical first aiders will, because I am yet to find someone who has gone on uh, who isn't a doctor, or doesn't work in emergency services, who's done CPR on someone in their office. It's probably happened. I'm sure it's happened before, but we force compulsorily people to have that skill that they will never use.
Or
They
won't
learn how
won't
the
remember
most
how to do
dangerous
it.
thing.
Yeah,
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 well,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, or they're too afraid to do it because they don't want to crack someone's ribs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm on board with this. Obviously a massive fan. One of the things that I always come across is, well, I thought that everyone should have suicide awareness training, or I think at the very basic, everyone should have some active listening training.
Yeah.
Do you think that you should, what's your ratio of everyone having active listening training, and then 1 in 5, 1 in 10 have do the mental health first aids, and then also be able to have trained or be comfortable with having a difficult conversation? Do you think they
Yeah.
all kind of go hand in hand?
I mean, the active listening and stuff. See, the active listening only really works if someone wants to talk to that person,
Yeah.
right? And so if they're not a particularly good listener anyway, so what I find is that I said I'd love to have say 10 people in each business or whatever. What we find is the people who come along to these workshops are actually the people who other people gravitate to talk about this stuff. So they're probably really good at active listening. Active listening is a great skill to have. It's a difficult skill to learn. And it is something that you're probably getting fairly good at with the podcasts and all that kind of stuff, because I can occasionally be mid-sentence with my past and forget what I'm sort of talking about, or forget what the question is occasionally. So I do apologize if that happens here. But like, we've got these skills, and it's great to be, I guess, to have them. Whether they're ever practiced and used, I guess, is another thing. The CPR thing is like, I've had, so what the sort of face-to-face workshop we run is 2 days, and this program used to be run by the Counties Manukau DHB many years ago, and then they would run it for free, but they made no money from it, and it just cost them heaps of money, so they kind of ditched it, and it's sort of been revitalized since. But and that's one of those times where I kind of forgot what I was talking about because I digressed. Um,
No, I mean, yeah, just letting it go, because I think it's interesting to share more around, the type of delivery and what you're focusing on. So you said 2 day course.
Yeah, sorry, 2 day course, and we would often find that people will come back on day two and say they've used skills that they learnt on day one. And so there used to be about a week in between. So when we were doing this with the DHB, it was like a Monday workshop and a Monday, or like a Saturday and a Saturday. And I had a mum and dad in particular. Their son had just been in a single person car crash, and they weren't sure whether it was a suicide attempt or not. They were like, we kind of think it is, but we're not really sure. And so we spoke about some ways that they could maybe leave some information around, or like approach the son to be like, like, you know, tell us what happened. And sort of they were quite worried. And so we discussed some things. One thing in particular was like um, we have like a lot of information pamphlets and stuff, about suicide and anxiety, da da da. And one kind of technique I found can work as like a sort of drop and leave, where you kind of bring some of the stuff home and sort of leave it in a place where there's a lot of foot traffic, and someone might see it and they might pick it up and they might go, oh, that resonates with me somehow, and then they might open up to somebody. And that didn't quite happen. But the mum, they came back the next week, and the mum said that she found one of the pamphlets in her son's room. So that was a huge win. Whether or not he was, it was a suicide attempt, or what it was, it made its way from the kitchen to his bedroom, and the parents didn't do it. So when I say like you'll use these skills, I'm not saying you're going to go and stop someone from ending their life straight away. But what you find with mental health first aid and reaching out, or offering that support, is it's the little things that actually make a huge difference in the back end. And a little thing as simple as just leaving a pamphlet on the bench, there's no pressure, there's no, maybe no feeling self-conscious of anyone watching. It just kind of is there, and then it ends up there. Yeah, so they were, still worried, but yeah, it's an example of using a skill like pretty much that night.
Well, that's hugely positive, right? I like that story. How can people find you or come on your first aid? What's your catchment area? Do you do online as well as in person? What's the
Yeah. So we have a few different versions of the workshop. So I contract or now work with HumanX, so humanx.co.nz, human and then ex.co.nz, co-founded by a couple of brilliant humans, Kate Figgins and Lindsay Rayner. I actually trained Lindsay, so she was in my first workshop as a trainer. So there's a bit of a full circle moment going on there. It's sort of so we've got the website there. They run a few different workshops with like leadership and other things as well. But in terms of mental health first aid, so we have a standard workshop, which is face to face, which is about 12 hours. So it's around 2 6-hour days. We have a workplace online version, which is sort of workplace/online. And that involves about 8 hours of self-learning, so e-learning, ish, depending on how quickly and how good you are at it. And then a couple of 3-hour Zoom sessions, just to kind of touch base with the facilitator, chance to ask questions, chance to kind of flesh things out a bit more. We have a blended version of that, which is some online sessions and then a face-to-face, just a 1 day. And recently they have brought in a youth version. So when I say youth version, it's still for 18 and over. So these are for people 18 and over. The youth version is for people who may not have children, but may also spend a lot of time in front of young people. So I'm thinking like teachers, coaches, that kind of ilk where, may not have kids, but are in front of young people a lot. And they've kind of focused the information. We still talk about, so there's 4 main topics: depression, anxiety, psychosis, and substance or problematic substance use. So we talk about those throughout all of the workshops. The youth version, though, they've added a couple of extra topics like eating disorders, and the examples and the data and that kind of stuff is obviously very youth focused. to make it relevant for them. So yeah, there's a few different versions. Obviously we love the face-to-face ones, because it's just a chance to connect with other people, and you know, everyone brings something different. So that's, part of the kind of the I don't know, the wonder of it, I suppose, is you learn so much stuff. But there's also a lot of value in the online ones for people who are trying to, if they've got a workforce spread across the country, you can't get everyone in one room. So like logistically, it's a lot more friendly. Yeah, but we there's the website to go on there, check out more information as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing your yarn today and sharing more about mental health first aid. It's always good to connect with someone who's doing some fantastic stuff in the community. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me.